If you want to make new boom bap beats, there are a few key ideas you need to get right. Otherwise, you risk making a mess of a beat that just doesn't sound right. So today, I'm going to share a simple framework anyone can use to make a new boom bap. By using this framework, you will never get stuck again, and you'll know exactly what your beat needs at every step. My name is Navy. I've been making boom bap beats for over 15 years. A bunch of my beats have been used by platinum artists, and today I am going to share this simple boom bap strategy with you. It's called the Bride Framework, and here's how it works. You've probably heard this old saying that on their wedding day, every bride needs something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue. Well, this might actually sound a bit weird, but this is the exact list that you need to make a modern boom bap as well. Let me prove it to you by showing you how this works and making a beat with this framework. So let's start off by looking for a sample. I'll go on to one of my favorite YouTube channels for finding samples and see what's here. Alright, this is the perfect kind of sample for today's boom bap. Now you might be wondering why. Well, when we take a look at classic 90s boom bap beats, they mostly focused on sampling genres like jazz and soul. And so you would often hear beats made up of sounds like pianos, guitars, keys, mallets, instruments mostly found in those classic genres. But that's not necessarily the case with new boom bap. One key difference between new and old boom bap is that new boom bap will explore using sounds that you just don't hear as often in these classic genres. And in this case, that's exactly what makes this orchestral sound at the beginning of the sample perfect. So that's one key piece down from our checklist. We now have something new for our boom bap beat. So let's begin by bringing this into our beat and turning it into a loop. But as you heard, the chopping point here doesn't sound all that natural. It sounds a bit abrupt when we loop back around. So here's what I'm going to do to fix this. I'll turn on poly mode. This basically lets chops overlap with each other. And then I'll turn up the release slightly on this chop. So now you can hear what happens. The loop now sounds more seamless because the strings in the sample, they continue to play and then overlap onto itself as the sample loops back around. This is just a small detail to get your beat to sound a little bit more natural if that's something you want. At this point though, some extra work does need to be done. If we take a listen to what we have so far, there's still one major problem that jumps out to me. And again, just take a listen here. So at this point, my worry is that the sample is just going to take up too much room. It's full and it's constantly loud. This has me a bit worried that I'm not going to be able to add more into this beat after this. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to use a plugin like Shaperbox. These kinds of plugins can be helpful if you want to manipulate the volume of your sample or add a filter or change the pitch or time of a sound. These are automation tools, so my hope is that I can find some kind of preset that will reduce how constantly present and loud this sample is. So let's give this preset here a try. Alright, so this is exactly what I want. Our loop now has sections in it where it minimizes and it isn't as loud, and this opens up more room for ideas later on. So here's exactly what's going on. Shaperbox is reducing the volume of the sample here. This filter ducks the brighter frequencies as well, opening up more space, but also the sample gets slowed and pitched down routinely as well. And this is going to make my life easier when I try to add more sounds to this beat a bit later. Speaking of which, why don't we just try doing that now? Going back to our checklist, we now have something new in our beat, this orchestral sound that typically wouldn't appear in a classic boom bap beat. But like I also mentioned, even new boom bap beats do have older, more classic sounds that show up as well. You often hear a blend or combination of both new and old sounds in these beats. So let's add this type of older, more classic jazzy sound next. Here, I'm gonna go with this Fender Rhodes. The The reason why I'm choosing this sound is because of how dominant and full this orchestral layer is. I think a sound that's a little bit more minimal and transparent like a Fender Rhodes can be, if you add some filters onto it, it would be a better fit overall. My hope is that it won't get in the way as much, but it'll still help me fill up the beat to sound more detailed and full. But the next question is, what pattern should I build around this sample? Well, to figure that out, I will use Note Grabber here. This is my plugin that I built to help give producers ideas whenever they use samples. This is Note Grabber 2, and by the time this video comes out, it might be out. If not, please be patient with me. It's just a few weeks away. So what this does is it shows me all the notes in my sample. And that way I can use what I'm seeing here to build a chord that works perfectly with my sample. So my plan is to build a really simple chord for this beat. So here we have a G. We also have a G sharp above it. You can see we have this D up here and a D sharp too. So after drawing these notes in, let's quickly preview how this chord sounds as a layer alongside my sample. All right, I like it. I think this adds a dark feeling to the beat, which is a great layer. So let me go ahead and drag this into my Fender Rhodes that I loaded up, and let's take a listen to how this sounds in the beat. Right now, I think this sounds a bit too bright for my liking. I don't think this pocket of frequencies is what my beat needs. So let's hear how this sounds if I move it into a lower octave. All right, I think this actually fits much better. Let me go ahead and slightly adjust these notes and build out this full pattern using this idea. Now, one reason why I want to add this additional layer into the beat is because it gives me material to create variation with. As you may remember from the sample, this beginning part is the only orchestral part we have to use. After this intro in the sample, it then goes into a completely different sounding song, so I can't really rely on more chops from the sample to create variation. I'm kind of just stuck with what I have, this short little piece of the sample that I've already used. But that's exactly how this new pattern can help. Since I have control over it, I can use this to create variation. For example, what if at the end of 8 bars, I took this very last chord down here and I bumped it down 5 semitones. I'll also reduce how thick these chords are while I'm at it here. And now let's take a listen. So even though the same sample is playing the exact same pattern, the beat just feels different during this part thanks to the change in my own pattern that I built here. I'll even reinforce this idea by adding this simple piano here. And I'll build yet another pattern that works with my sample, but musically it changes at the very end to help reinforce that same variation that I built. And this is why I recommend learning how to layer your own sounds and ideas and patterns with your sample, even if they are very simple ideas that you build, because these are the exact ideas that you can use to create variation in your beat. I know a lot of producers get stuck turning their loops into full beats, and it's mostly because they don't have enough material to create change with. And again, if this is something you struggle with, this is why I built Note Grabber. By just seeing what notes exist in your sample, it can give you ideas that you can build around your sample so you're never stuck. Anyways, let's go back to our Bride framework. We have something new, we have this orchestral layer in the beat, and now we have something old with our classic jazz sound of the Fender Rhodes, as well as that simple piano. Next up, let's move on to something borrowed, and this is where we talk about drums. If you try using stock sounds that come with your beat making program or stock drum kits, it's probably just not going to sound right. The drums in new boom bap beats are often taken or borrowed from classic drum breaks. And what this does is it provides the beat with much more detail and texture, whereas using stock sounds can make the beat feel flat and basic and a little bit robotic. Now, in case you are worried about copyright issues or sample clearance issues if you're sampling drum breaks from classic songs, there are plenty of drum break packs that you can download or buy. And I'll quickly mention I built a custom drum pack called Hard Drums for Boom Bap. This is a collection of drum breaks that you can use freely and you never have to worry about sample clearance. If you buy this pack, they are yours to use as you want forever, and you can do it without seeking permission or anything at all. So these drums are exactly what I'm going to use for this beat. Now, when choosing a drum break for the beat, I like to let my loop play as I go through the different options available. And as I do this, I'm mostly listening for which drum breaks have textures that create a good balance in the beat. Some drum loops will have dense, full, thick sounds in them, like huge kicks and snares, while other ones will have thinner, more flexible sounds. And it's all about choosing which drum break provides the best balance for your beat that you're making. So I think this drum break here sounds great. The snare and the kick in it are a bit thinner, which fits with this larger texture I have in the beat of these thicker, more full chords and this huge orchestral sound. So let's bring this into the beat. All right, perfect. So far we have something old. We have those old classic jazz sounds in the beat. We have something new, meaning we have a sound or idea that just wouldn't show up in a classic traditional boom bap song, which is that orchestral sound helping my boom bap beat sound more current. And now we have something borrowed. We're not using stock drums, which can sound too basic or bland, and we are using a drum break instead. At this point, all that's left is something blue. Now, what does this mean? Well, with many of today's boom bap beats, they are built to have a more dark or melancholy or blue feeling to them. You don't often hear a lot of happy-go-lucky boom bap beats. So the question is, how can you create this in your beats? Well, unfortunately, I'm not a music theory guy. I actually don't know music theory at all. But one thing I do to create this feeling in a beat is build patterns that have notes that are one step away from each other. And that's in fact what we've already done in this beat. You can see with the patterns that I've built, we have notes that are one step away from one another. This pattern too. And if you remember when looking at Note Grabber, you can see the sample itself has this idea in it as well. So we actually already have a lot of blue ideas in this beat, but just for the sake of it, let's build yet another pattern that has this blue feeling. At this point, all that's left is a bass line for this beat, so let's work on that. I will grab this bass guitar here, which is a common sound found in many of today's boom bap beats. Just a side tip, with classic boom bap, you would typically hear a lot of upright basses, so that's yet another difference between these two styles of beats. And here's another difference. At times, modern boom bap beats use thinner, weaker bass tones, with subbier basses appearing less frequently in the bass line. So that's an idea I will use for this pattern as well. Not only will I use notes that are one step away from each other to get that blue feeling, but I'll also play them at a higher octave to create that thinner bass feeling for this beat. Now, one bonus detail that you can include is creating bass slides. This can be a great way to get your bass line to stand out and have much more personality. So here's how I'm going to do that. I will record this simple pattern as audio. Then I'll bring this into my beat and use it like it's a sample, but from here for my actual pattern, I will create a regular loop like this as a starting point. But here's what I will do differently. I will use note slides, and that way I can get the audio to slide, making it sound much more unique. Then from here, I will use a secondary bass during these open pockets in the bass line to bring in that more thick, full subby bass. Plus, I also think it's a good idea to use this bass line to reinforce that change in the last part of the loop, again, helping bring variation to the beat. Alright, so that is my checklist complete. So that's a framework that you can use for your modern boom bap beats, but once again, if you are in need of drums for making these types of beats, check out Hard Drums for Boom Bap, which can be found right next to me. If you use these drums in your beats, you never have to worry. You can release your songs, you can use these drums as you like, but there are a few more key ideas you need to know if you want to build good drums for modern boom bap beats. So that's exactly what I cover in this video right next to me. Like and subscribe and click something. Come on.